was shewn into the attic chamber by a grave, intelligent-looking man with quiet clothes and an iron grey beard, who spoke to me in this fashion.
Yes, he lived here. But I don't advise you doing anything. Your curiosity makes you irresponsible. We never come here at night, and it's only because of his will that we keep it this way. You know what he did. That abominable society took charge at last, and we don't know where he is buried. There is no way the law or anything else could ever reach this abominable society. I beg of you to let that thing, the one that looks like a matchbox, alone. We don't know what it is, but we suspect that it's something to do with what he did. We even avoid looking at it very steadily.
After a time, the man left me alone in the attic room. It was very dingy and dusty, and only primitively furnished, but it had a neatness which shewed it was not a slum denizen's quarters. There were shelves full of theological and classical books, and another bookcase containing treatises on magic. Paracelsus, Albertus Magnus, Trithemius, Hermes Trismegistius, Borlus, and others in strange alphabets whose titles I could not decipher. The furniture was very plain. There was a door, but it led only to a closet. The only egress was the aperture on the floor, up to which the crude, steep staircase led. The windows were of bull's-eyes pattern, and the black oak beams bespoke unbelievable antiquity. Plainly, this house was of the old world. I seem to know where I was, but cannot recall what I then knew. Certainly, the town was not London. My impression is of a small seaport.
The small object on the table fascinated me intensely. I seemed to know what to do with it, for I drew a pocket electric light, or what looked like one, out of my pocket, and nervously tested its flashes. The light was not white, but violet, and seemed less like true light than some radioactive bombardment. I recall that I did not regard it as a common flashlight. Indeed, I had a common flashlight in another pocket. It was getting dark, and the ancient roofs and chimney pots outside looked very queer through the bull's-eye window panes. Finally, I summoned up courage and propped the small object up on the table against a book, then turned the rays of the peculiar violet light upon it. The light seemed now to be more like a rain or hail of small violet particles than like a continuous beam. As the particles struck the glassy surface at the centre of the strange device, they seemed to produce a crackling noise, like the spluttering of a vacuum tube through which sparks are passed. The dark, glassy surface displayed a pinkish glow, and a vague white shape seemed to be taking form at its centre. Then I noticed that I was not alone in the room, and put the ray projector back in my pocket.
But the newcomer did not speak, nor did I hear any sound whatever during the immediately following moments. Everything was shadowy pantomime, as if seen at a vast distance through some intervening haze. Although, on the other hand, the newcomer and all subsequent comers loomed large and close, as if both near and distant, according to some abnormal geometry. The newcomer was a thin, dark man of medium height, attired in a clerical garb of the Anglican Church. He was apparently about 30 years old, with a sallow olive complexion and fairly good features, but an abnormally high forehead. His black hair was well cut and neatly brushed, and he was clean-shaven, though blue-chinned, with a heavy growth of beard. He wore rimless spectacles with steel bows. His build and lower facial features were like other clergymen I had seen, but he had a vastly higher forehead and was darker and more intelligent looking, also more subtly and concealedly evil looking. At the present moment, having just lighted a faint oil lamp, he looked nervous, and before I knew it, he was casting all his magical books into the fireplace on the window side of the room, where the wall slanted sharply, which I had not noticed before. The flames devoured the volumes greedily, leaping up in strange colours and emitting indescribably hideous odours as the strangely hieroglyphed leaves and wormy bindings succumbed to the devastating element. All at once I saw there were others in the room, grave-looking men in clerical costume, one of whom wore the bands and knee breeches of a bishop. Though I could hear nothing, I could see that they were bringing a decision of vast import to the first comer. They seemed to hate and fear him at the same time, and he seemed to return these sentiments. His face set itself into grim expression, but I could see his right hand shaking as he tried to grip the back of a chair. The bishop pointed to the empty case and to the fireplace, where the flames had died down amidst a charred, non-committal mass, and seemed filled with a peculiar loathing. The first comer then gave a weary smile and reached out with his left hand towards the small object on the table. Everyone then seemed frightened. The procession of clerics began filing down the steep stairs through the trapdoor in the floor, turning and making menacing gestures as they left. The newcomer now went to the cupboard on the inner side of the room and extracted a coil of rope. Mounting a chair, he attached one end of the rope to a hook on the great exposed central beam of black oak, and began to make a noose on the other end. Realising he was about to hang himself, I started to dissuade or save him. He saw me and ceased his preparations, looking at me in the kind of triumph which puzzled and disturbed me. He slowly stepped down from the chair and began gliding towards me, with a positively wolfish grin on his dark, thin-lipped face. I felt somehow in deadly peril, and drew out the peculiar ray projector as a weapon of defence. Why I thought that had helped me, I do not know. I turned it on. Full in his face I saw the shallow features glow first with violet and then pinkish light. His expression of wolfish exultation began to be crowded aside by a look of profound fear, which did not, however, wholly displace the exultation. He stopped in his tracks, then, flailing his arms wildly in the air, began to stagger backward. I saw he was edging towards the open stairwell in the floor and tried to shout warning. He did not hear me. In another instant he had lurched back through the opening and was lost to view. I found difficulty in moving towards the stairwell, but when I did get there, I found no crushed body on the floor below. Instead, there was a clatter of people coming up with lanterns for the spell dimension. Something had evidently drawn the crowd to this place. Had there been a noise I had not heard? Presently, the two people, simply villagers apparently, farthest in the lead saw me, and stood paralysed. One of them shrieked loudly and revered quickly.
Then they all turned and fled frantically. All that is, but one. When the crowd was gone, I saw the grave, bearded man who had brought me to this place, standing alone with a lantern. He was gazing at me, gaspingly and fascinatedly, but did not seem afraid. Then he began to ascend the stairs and joined me.
So you didn't let it alone? I'm sorry, I know what happened. It happened once before, but the man got frightened and shot himself. You ought not to have made him come back. You know what he wants. But you mustn't get frightened like the other man had got. Something very strange and terrible has happened to you. Something very strange and terrible has happened to you, but it didn't get far enough to hurt your mind and personality. If you'll keep cool and make certain radical readjustments in your life, you'll enjoy the fruits and scholarships of your new life, but you can't live here. And I don't think you'll wish to go back to London. I'd advise America. You mustn't try any more with that thing. Nothing can be put back now. It would only make things worse. To do or summon anything. You're not as badly off as you might be. But you must get out of here and stay away. You better thank heaven it didn't go further. There's been a certain change in your appearance. He always does that. But in a new country, you can get used to it. There's a mirror on the wall at the other end of the room. I'm going to take you to it. You'll get a shock, though you'll see nothing repulsive.
I was now shaking with a deadly fear, and the bearded man almost had to hold me up as he walked me across the room to the mirror. The faint lamp, i.e. that formerly on the table, not the still fainter lamp he had brought, in his free hand. This is what I saw in the glass. A thin, dark man of medium stature, attired in the clerical garb of the Anglican Church, apparently about 30, with rimless, steel-bowed glasses, glistening beneath a sallow, olive forehead of abnormal height. It was the silent first-comer who had burned his books. For all the rest of my life, in outward form, I was to be that man.